Phones.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our UDK Tuesday number 245. We are very excited to welcome our guest, Francisco Cifuentes, and also, Sebastia Martorell on behalf of Aulets Arquitectes, as well as Carl Oliver. From Spain, upon invitation from Professor Sobejano, and feel free to ask your questions and discuss after the lecture. And now I'll leave it to Professor Sobejano to present our guest.
Thank you very much, Annalena. Okay. Thank you, and especially thank you very much to our guests. I'm particularly very happy to have here today, as Annalena just said, Francisco Cifuentes. I say it now in the Spanish way. Francisco Cifuentes, Sebastia Martorell, or Catalan way, and Carles Oliver. Yeah, they are architects from the. I have to explain the way they come here. Francisco Cifuentes and Sebastia Martorell, they are partners of the office called Aulets from Palma de Mallorca. And Carles Oliver, that was working sometime as a practicing architect, working also, as far as I know, with Cifuentes. He's now in a very special position that I found very interesting to be here today, because they are very linked with the work they do. He's now the responsible of the technical department of the public housing in the Balearic Islands. So today we are going to hear a lot of Mallorca, and I know that Mallorca is so apparently very well known among Germans, but I'm pretty sure that you're going to listen to a very different way, deeper connected to the place, to the culture, which represents very much what the work of Aulets and Carles Oliver has to do. That's the reason I was especially interested in having them here. They are practicing architects. They are also teaching. They're involved in teaching. In the case of Francisco Cifuentes, he is a doctor, Dr. Cifuentes. He's professor, he's a PhD on a very interesting theme, who is Guillem Sagrera, and this is the Lonja of Palma. Maybe some of you have been there. Next time you go to Palma, go to see that building, but especially after listening whatever he says about that, because he's so interesting in that sense. All of them, Sebastia and Cifuentes, and they are working as architects, and they want to talk about their work. In the case of Carles Oliver, they want to talk, he's going to probably, I don't know what he's going to talk, but definitely they are linking this fact to a very interesting issue. They are, all of them, interested in the culture of research in landscape, territory, architecture, local materials, local crafts, social housing, and public, in the sense, public promotion, and a very deep understanding, and this is one of the reasons I was very interested in having them here, on this sustainable approach to architecture that in many cases is not easily understood because of the difficulty that has to really put the fact of making it real and not only a sort of theoretical position. Yeah, and I find their work extremely interesting. I have to say that this is not I knew their work from the publications, but I happened to meet them like 2 months ago when we both were invited for different reasons to the University of Aarhus in Denmark, where there was a symposium on John Utzon. You have some of those of you who have been my students have listened to me several times talking about the work of John Utzon. So it happened that John Utzon somehow became a common denominator, even being of different generations as we are, and even different approaches to architecture. Somehow I have the feeling that John Utzon became a very deep link that is not only important in the work of Aulets, and I guess in generally speaking, maybe some of you remember that we invited EAR Arquitectes some years ago. Maybe you were not yet here. So other architects in Mallorca, but rather also important for this approach that I would like you to think and discuss. So I think it's a great opportunity to have you all three here. And this is my last word up to now. From now on, it's your part. Thank you very much.
Hi, good evening. Are you listening to me? Yeah. It's a real pleasure for us to be here with you today in Berlin. Thank you to Professor Sobejano for his kind invitation. The lecture is called Next, Stone and Wood. And today I am Carlos. I'm going to be Mr. Stone.
I am Francisco Cifuentes, as today I am Mr. Wood.
And as you can see, in between the stone of the quarry and the wood on the top, there is a layer of earth and corresponds to Mr. Sebastian.
Hi, Sebastian. What is the...
And has de passar tot? Has de passar les imatges? Okay, so next one. We're going to talk about architecture and we're coming from the side effects. Okay, so next. The first image, the most important one. This is the drawing by the International Climate Change Panel. So they are like drawing the different scenarios we're going. So in blue color, you have the one that achieves the Paris agreements. Do you know what are the Paris agreements? That we have to stay in 2 degrees? Okay, so this is where are supposed to go, but we're going straight ahead to the red one, which is between the 3 and 5 degrees. So that means that we are not doing things properly. We have to change. Since we don't know you at all, do you think we have to change what we are doing now? Can you raise your hands? Can you raise your hands if you think we have to change stuff? So it's kind of general, right? Okay, so probably we could talk together. Next. Okay.
This is our place that we work, the Mediterranean Sea, and this image is a map that shows the temperature of the surface in July 2015. These are the normal conditions, but today this temperature is more longer and more heavy, and we change our condition of inhabit. It is so important to understand this map and to understand what is the new conditions and what is the projects change to adapt to this situation. Next.
So last December 2021 was approved the new draft of the Directive of Energy Performance by the European Parliament. And probably you think that you don't care at all because it's not useful for your stuff. But next, Article 7, it specifies that in 2027, that's tomorrow, new public buildings must be zero emissions. Zero emissions not only during the useful life, so it's not only about designing how are we going to use the buildings, but how are we going to build the buildings, because probably it will include the way that the buildings are constructed. So all the carbon emissions that you are producing during the building of the stuff. So that changed completely the rules, because usually when you're talking about sustainability, usually sustainable like solutions are a little bit more expensive. So you're trying to make it cheaper for like filling the budget, and then you're discarding that this solution that probably they would work. But in the moment that you have to be zero emission, appear the carbon dioxide compensation project. Do you know what is a compensation project? Can you raise your hands if you know? Please, can you raise your hand? Don't be afraid, we don't bite. Okay, so not very much. We're going to explain. So if you're producing carbon dioxide, you can pay money to invest, for instance, in planting some trees. So if a pine is absorbing 300 kilograms of carbon dioxide, so you plant a number of pines to compensate the tons of carbon dioxide that you produce with your building. Does it make sense for you? So you will have to pay some money to compensate your building if it's polluting a lot. But if your design pollutes less, you will pay less. So that means balance. So a very well-designed building will be probably the less or even cheaper than a by-design building, and then you have to pay a lot of compensation projects. Are we agree? Next. So we have that the concrete produces the 8% of the world's pollution, and this is a lot. For instance, heating is only about 6%. So it's more than all the heating of the world. You know why? Because of the energies. You need fossil fuel energies to produce concrete at 1,500 degrees. Probably when you heard that about construction, in your construction lessons, you were feeling slept and you think, no, that I don't care at all about temperature, right? But it's not true, because you cannot achieve 1,500 degrees with clean energies. So They have studied in this report, it's a British report, and they've studied the many concretes that are in under development, a kind of green concretes, and none of them it's now available on the market. It's everything under development. But they were supposed to be here since 2008, and now, next. Everyone related to that is asking what happened to green concrete, because it's not here. So it should be here. So meanwhile, all, let's say, the factories and companies are changing, and they're producing this ecological transition. Is it possible to do something? Can we find another way? Next. And carbon dioxide is not the only problem we are facing. For instance, that's a factory in Bangladesh. They're doing t-shirts. So now, guys, can you raise your hand if any one of you is sure that you don't have a single shirt or t-shirt at home that is produced in a place like that? Can you raise your hands? That's brave. That's very brave. So it's one in a class. And you know why? Because you don't have the information. You don't have the traceability, and you don't have the regulations. The only way to change that is through regulations. So we architects will have to take part in those regulations. And if you want to change that, you have to change regulations, because it's the only way that the change will appear. Next.
Okay, resources. It's so important to know what is the resources of the earth to make a balance with our consumption. Past. This slide shows a graph with the Earth overshot day. What is this? It's the relation between the resources of the Earth and our consumption. You see in the 70s, the balance between our consumption and resources, the balance is the balance between resources and consumption. After this year, every year, has grown until arrives 2021 that we need 1.7 Earth. Do you understand the graphic? Yes. You see in 2020, the COVID year, you see that our consumption is reduced and we don't use some resources. And what's happened? Our GDP in the world less down, reduced 3 points. In Balearic Islands, 20 points. This is important because this relation, only this point, this reduce consumption, change so much the GDP. First, we have two options. One option is to adapt to catch us by surprise to the changes. And what is the meaning of this? That, for example, this is the picture in the 70s, and these people change the petrol with coals. And you adapt with the resources that you have in that moment. No? And your lifestyle is more slower. We have another option. You can read in this sentence that we make the another option is to adapt by programming to the changes. What is the meaning of this? That we have a limitation factor of our civilization. The resource is limited to understand what is our conditions on the lifestyle. This is important because it's important to reduce our consumption, to adapt our lifestyle to the resources of the earth. And this is the limit of our lifestyle. For us, it's important to study what is the resources of our island for build our buildings. In this case, you have on left, this is a geological map. This is the resources that we have underground. In this case, you have the mountains with calcareous stone, and between the mountains, we have sandstone. The difference is it's more easy to cut the sandstone than the other. Upground, we have the renewable resources, and with the forest, with the forest you have trees and plants, and we can use the plants that there are underwater. And this is our resources in the island. In the first photograph, you see Maroes, the sandstone. It's so easy to cut, and it's so easy to make an industrial process. On the second is clay for make bricks, ceramic, and third, the wood. And it's so important after you have the natural resources, you get the natural materials, and it's important the hands with the workers and desenvolve the local productive fabric. For example, in the first photograph is the relation between the worker with stone, the worker with clay, and the worker with wood. And it's important that these people use his hands, the tools, the facilities for the fabric, and finally his knowledge to develop the new techniques for use these materials in the new condition of the us.
So in order to work with that, probably we need to change the language. And we know, like since 100 years ago, that we people see and think through the language. That means that we cannot see what we don't have a word for that. So next, as happened to the American Aborigines, they were not able to see a railroad because they didn't have the word for a train. So they were watching fire dragons. So it happens the same with everything, even with an architecture. So if we don't share a language, we are not able to have a proper conversation. So in order to understand that, we believe that since the international movement, and international style, and everything that is produced since then, is the expression of those materials produced with fossil fuel energies. And that's the reason, that everything in this capitalistic economy is working and is not longer useful for us. Probably we need to change the materials we're working with. And we discover, we tested, and we prove that if you work with the materials from those ages previous to the Industrial Revolution, they have very low carbon dioxide emissions, and they still available on the peripheral areas. So on the peripheries, you can use them, and maybe through time, you can recover even in more important places. So these materials are the expression of the resources of the place. So as you can see, these Greek buildings that probably you know from Bernard Rudolsky publication, probably you have this book, Architecture Without Architects, at home. So that's the expression of the place. Next. As well, this very expressive architecture in Iran is not something that you do because you like the shapes or everything. That's the expression, next, of this very hard map of resources that is the desert. So working from there, working from the resources, you have a very specific architecture adapted to every condition of the place. So since we have 7,000 spoken languages in the world, we believe that maybe we could have at least 7,000 languages of the growth in architecture, everyone adapted to your specific conditions. So we're working and we're like doing our stuff, and probably you cannot copy that for sure, but you can work with the same ideas, same philosophy, and then to adapt to your resources and to try to see what's going on here. Next. Libraries in Posidonia is a climate change adaptation project funded by the European Commission. Next, that's testing that we can degrow in the consumption of resources, but we can grow in comfort. And the idea behind is that we don't inhabit a house, but an ecosystem. So everything we do, it deals with the surroundings. And for instance, this is Posidonia oceanica. Probably you don't know that plant, but it's the reason why some of you are going to have a bath in the Mediterranean or maybe in the Balearic Islands, because this plant provides the clearness of the water. Next, these dark stains is what clears the water. That's the reason why everyone goes there. Next, and this plant, when the leaves die every year, are on the beach, and this is not dirty. This is not like a waste. This is something that the beach needs in order to be protected from the storms at the October and November rains, okay? So it's a whole ecosystem that works as like a switch, like a Swiss swatch. Next. And we use the excedent of these plants in order to provide insulations for the roof. So we don't destroy the beach, we just get what we need in order to provide this 185 kilograms per square meter. Next. In this building, where every single material has been tested because of the carbon dioxide and trying to know the names of the people who's producing the materials. So you know the labor conditions of the people who's working there. Next. And as you can see, it's not only about carbon dioxide emissions, it's about architecture. Because what we want to provide, it's an architecture, integrated to the place. So it's about landscape. Next. It's about program. It's about the layout. So here, comfort, structure, construction, program, everything comes from the single strategy and everything is linked to provide a single solution that's related to those fragile materials which are natural. And since they're natural, they're softer than the more modern ones. Do you understand that? No? Sandstone, earth, whatever, it's always more fragile than concrete or steel.
After we explain the side effects and the resources, it's important to understand what is the technique to use these two materials. Pass. Next. We use the stone. You can see a quarry of sandstone and the forest. No? And when you use those materials, there are two techniques. On the left, you use the stereotomic. Now to explain different slides. On right, tectonic. And it's so nice because you understand only for get the material for the sources, you use different tools. You can to see to cut the stone. You need some tools that are different to cut trees on the forest. It's important because this is the difference. You start with get the material to the natural resources. Next. Here we try to explain this with these two pictures, not so clear to see on the left. That is nice because it's two pictures in the 15th century. On left is Santa Barbara of Jan Marek. On right, Noah's Ark. It's a book about the king of Westford. But it's interesting because in these two pictures, you see on left, they use different tools, different facilities, and finally the expression of the building show the massive of the stone. On the right is difference. Imagine the tools on the it's more clear. You see that for cut parts or make wood, different than the tools to cut stone, tools, the facilities, and finally the expression of the building is another. Next. It's so nice. Because in this photograph, it's so clear how to find your right to explain the stereotomics, and tectonic.
Tectonics.
It's so funny, but it's so clear because this is the relation between only cut the pillar and after we explain another contingents. On tectonic, you use the different profiles and make joints. For example, the first joints is the cabin of Amazonas, no? It's the first houses before the big civilization. It's only different structures, profiles, and they make the joints with ropes. This is tectonic. The relation to make the joints, these profiles. Next. This is different. For instance, these two buildings on left. This is the building of in Palma de Mallorca. It's a building that in the 15th century. On the right is a book about how to build a pagoda. It's so nice because after 200 years making pagodas, they make this book. And it's so you see the difference, no? On left, for example, we talked before, you take the stone and the other stone, you cut horizontal from put another piece. But after, you achieve this continuity of the pillar. This is tectonic. These two things: to cut, to make compression, and the other to achieve this continuity. All right. This is a little model for exhibition. This is good. This is an example of how to use these elements for make a pagoda. In this case, they use a profile, they make a hole, and after they put another piece with another hole. It's more right. Next. After you use this piece, you put another piece, and you make this continuity with these elements, no? And it's on right, you use the profiles with the pagoda, another profiles. You make these cantilevers, is more right. Continuity. After they use this element, this piece, you cut, you type this continuity, you have an atmosphere of this building is more massive. Against, you have this big, for that moment, these bigger cantilevers, and it's more light. It's important that is the difference between steratomic and tectonic. Next. And now we explain the project with Carlos Oliver with steratomic, Mr. Wood, and after we explain the project with Wood, our ledge, that today is Mr. Wood, and some project with clay. Next.
Okay, so let's go with some stone projects. This is a social housing project in Palma. So this is social on rental basis. Okay, so what you're going to see here is what we're doing at the Balearic social housing. This is not my main job. My main job as CTO there is to organize as 45 buildings we're developing, like 1,200 dwellings. And this is just some examples that we are designing in-house in order to provide like the path where we want to go. Okay, next. So sandstone. Why sandstone? Because when we're talking about sustainability, a lot of time we're talking about only light structures and only made in wood and only like a lot of concepts that are not always related to the climate conditions of the place. So in Mallorca, we have a humidity of the 70%, and it's so hot that the massive structures are so useful even today. So we have some quarries next. And the sandstone covers like the 20% of the surface of the island. So having stone is not the problem for us. Next. But the quarries are under extinction because we used to have like 1,000 quarries, and now we have only 10 remaining. And most of them are driven by very old people that's going to retire in a few years. So we need to put the interest on it in order that some young people wants to work there, unless it's too late. Next. So this is one of the quarries that we use the stone next to do this project. This is 8 social housing, and is designed from the qualities of the stone. Next. It's a project next to the highway, so we have a lot in account the wind from the sea, since we are an island that's very useful for providing free cooling in summer, okay? But here, since we are next to the highway, we were not sure that we could use this free cooling because we want to close the windows, right, for not having noise. Does it make sense for you? So we were like thinking how it's possible to have like the most massive possible solution. Next. And we arrived to the idea that using a single material, both for walls and ceilings, we could achieve this massive solution with stone vaults that you can see here. And the stone vaults requires structures on both facades in order to have a way to make a deal with the horizontal efforts of the structure. Does it make sense for you? Probably you know about that, right? Next. So in the facades, we set the program. We set the entries, we set the kitchens, we set the storage, we set everything. So here is, once again, this concept that structure, construction, layout comes from the qualities of the materials that you are using. Next. So that's the view from the bedroom. You can see these columns on the facade. Next. It looks the same when it's under construction and when it's finished, because we try to reduce as maximum the number of materials we're using in order to use less resources and to make it cheaper. Next. This is the space as it's finished. You can see the kitchen and everything between the columns. Next. This is the first floor. In the first floor, we cannot use vaults again because the horizontal efforts are too bigger. So we need to put a pitch wooden roof, which is very cheap. And with the money that you save from the pitch roof, you can pay the extra amount of money that you need for the vaults. Does it make sense for you? So fitting this kind of projects requires that everything is at its specific place. So everything It's done by a reason. There's nothing because I want to, or because I like, or because I feel like. It's about what is the right solution for this purpose with these abstractions that we're setting there. Next. And once again, same. You can see the reused wood panels on the ceiling. Next. That's a kitchen. That's another kitchen. Next. That's the facade. We are going late, so I'm not going to talk about the facade. If you want, I'm going to explain it later. Next. That's about how we're doing saving steel, iron, steel, and everything, or whatever. Next. And this is the Posidonia once again. So that's a factory. So that's the most cheap factory that probably you ever seen. That's one man factory, and you need sun. Next. You put it on the roof. Next, and it works pretty well, and we have been using this as a society since 14th century. So we know that it doesn't get rotten, and there are no predators for Posidonia out of the water, so it works perfectly. So then we have to cover with like proper materials, then we cover with the clay and the tiles, and we express the tiles. Because there's nothing wrong in expressing like the proper materials you are using. It's no reason to be modern or something and try to hide it with a wall or whatever. You can express the materials you're using in a free way. Next. As it happens in the other building that we are designing just in front of, it's 19 dwellings. Next is the building on the left. Now explain the first one on the right. Next. It's also done in load-bearing walls, but in this case, it's a wood structure in both floors. Next. This is the facade under construction. Next. And it's about repetition. Repetition is so important when you're using natural materials because it makes cheaper. So industrialization, standardization can be possible with very natural solutions. And if you repeat a lot, you will make cheaper and it will be possible to fit it in your budgets. Because one day you will have to deal with budgets. Next. So repetition as a way to make it cheaper. Repetition, because deep repetition is characterized by profound difference, is something that we are really interested also. Next. And as Stephen Bates explained, the less we require to be new, the more refined it will become. So we are trying to repeat the same project once again, and once again, and once again, to make it better, more efficient, cheaper, faster. Next. So that's another project in Santa Eugenia, which is like the 2.0 version of the previous project. Next, here's some stuff that we found we had to demolish. So we're going to reuse everything that you are seeing in the pictures. Next. And this is the image of the picture. And in this case, everything is very repetitive. The windows are all the same, all in the same place. No movement for the windows, no nothing. Next. And only a trombe wall on the south facade in order to provide heat for the winter renovation of the air. So in winter, you don't get the air from the street, which is going to be between 5 and 10 degrees. You will get it from this trombe wall, which will be between 15 and 20 degrees. So you need no heating at all. So we are using no cooling because we're providing mass, we're providing sun protection, we're providing winds, and then for the winter, we're providing this air renovation. So that's the reason why with only 4 kilowatts per square meter per year, you have this building where you are going to have no energy poverty for the people that's going to live in there. Next. So this is a best option. So you have 3 lines of columns. So you are using less concrete. It's not that we don't want to use concrete. It's we need some concrete always in the foundations. And then in the rest of the building, you are using it where you really need it. So it's about to be conscious about the impact of everything that you're using, and then you are using in a proper way. Next. The plan again, which is like more clear than the previous one. You can have a whole clean plan, and then you have all the services on the perimeter, and then you can use the plan as you wish. So it's a very hard infrastructure, extremely flexible. So then you can put the bedrooms where you want. Next. You can see in the plans, you can put the bedrooms in the corner in one way or another way. So We're not thinking about like recycling the building in 20 years. We think that the building should last like 200 years, and then it can be reused once again and once again through this time, changing the purpose and the program. Next. We're modeling the winds, so we're using the most modern tools in order to be sure that it's going to work properly. Next. And at the end, we will test it as we do with every building. Because if you don't have the numbers, you don't know if it's working or not. So you can be like designing stuff all your life, and you have no idea if it's like achieving the goals that you are trying to get. Next. This is the way that we build a vault. It's very simple. I mean, you don't need to study like any kind of starships for doing that. This is the space. That's some pictures from 3 months ago. That's how it looks, a unit. So this is a single dwelling, and you can use the space as you wish. Next, for instance, setting these wooden doors in order to define the space for the bedrooms, and the rest is the living room. Next. And this is this cover that we want to show because it's very Roman. So here you have 2 columns with a lintel, with lime mortar, as it was used in the Roman Empire, right? So these are the techniques that we're using now in order to make possible to achieve, the goals, the Paris agreements, and sustainability stuff. So it's like very weird at the beginning, but it works. Next. And that's the space that we were providing for these social housing units. So people here is going to pay like, depend on their conditions, between 200, 400 euros for these dwellings in Mallorca. That, as you can understand, we have so many Germans in Mallorca that the price of the house is very, very high. Next. And we study also the conditions in 2050. So we don't want to provide only the dwellings now, we want to provide them this comfort even in 30 years. Next. And thanks to the effort that we're doing at the Balearic Social Housing Institute, there are so many dwellings done with this sandstone, like more than 250, that the facilities of the sandstone, which were very old, led by these people that is going to retire from the 50s. The machines are from the 50s. People, can you imagine that, working with machines from the 50s? So now some people is investing some money because they know that new projects are coming in. Next. And these are the videos of people who is getting in the houses because, listen, it's in Spanish, doesn't matter. We've been told that the regular people won't understand this architecture. It's not true. Next. This is regular people enjoying stone houses. It's because it comes from their culture, I mean, it's nothing weird. It's what they are. It's from their place, so they can understand. And now let's go for some refurbishments. That's a project that we did in 2017. And here we explore about not doing and undoing as a way to do. So as you can see, it's about doing very few things. So the project has been done with 18,000 euros. Next. So it's only about providing some holes to provide a path for the wind to refresh all the rooms. And first of all, we remove the ceiling in order to check how is the structure. So we want to check if the structure is proper or we have to reinforce everything. Luckily, it was fine. We only changed one single beam in all the building. Next. And then we did some holes. Why this shape? Do you think it's because we believe it's beauty? Because we feel that way? We felt like wild? I'm going to make a hole. Of course not. It's because form follows tool. The shape of the hole is the shape of the hand in that case, as it happens in the quarries next. That's a quarry in Mallorca and another one in Sicily. And they look the same because the tools were the same. So opening a door sometimes is not the same than building a door, because building a door is about adding some materials in this stereotomic way that Cifu has explained before. but opening holes maybe requires different tools. Next one. Next. Next. And yeah, to finish this exposition, this is Canlis, which is probably the only architecture school we have in Mallorca.
Next. It's so important because when we study, we went to see Canlis, and Canlis is so clear. They use marble stone, and so they cut the piece. But when you see the bench, you see it's nice because the bench adapt to the body human. Its shape.
Wait, do you know about Canlis?
Canlis.
Have you heard about that house before? Okay, go back. Please. Okay, go back. Go back.
Yes.
Sebas, go
Go
back.
back.
Okay. Do you know about the house? Have you heard about that? Yes, can
Yes.
you raise your hand if you know about the house? Okay, 0.5%. Okay, so this is the best house in Mallorca, and it's the house that John Knudsen did in 72. Okay, next.
Yes. And if you know, it's nice because that house in the 70s, they reuse the Maresa stone and they change the process because the concrete won a lot of user of the building. No, I mean, Hudson arrived in the 70s and built this house with Maoes. No, it's so nice because there are these bench and the shape of this bank is in relation with the body human. Next. And John Hudson have a friend, is Sigurd Leverens, you know Sigurd Leverens? And
You should.
St. Petri in Capeland. It's nice because there are a relation between the bench of Canlis and the bench of St. Petri in Capeland. And the relation between how is this the different angles to make the shape of this bench to adapt to the body human. Next. And here is nice, this is a drawing of Leverens, but it's a collage that made a friend, and they put in the same drawing the bench and a chair. The chair made, I think, 5-6 years after that the bench. And it's so nice because you see that the shape of different angles is the same with the chair and the bench. Next. There is the chair.
Can you see that the chair is looking for the precise position of the bricks?
And it's nice because Hudson used Maoes, stone, Leverens brick, and for me the chair they used steel and wood. Next, and we made a replica for make a refurbishment of a coffee and concert in a public place in public local in Manacor
In Manacor, in Mallorca.
in Mallorca. Next.
So this is the place that was a concert hall, so we had to deal with the acoustics. So we were working with the surfaces of the things. So here we need some acoustic insulation, and we use the Posidonia again, but in this case it's exposed in order to work with the sound and noise. Next. And we removed the false ceilings in order to recover what was previous in the building, in this building that first of all was a house, then was a bakery, then was a restaurant, and now is a concert hall. So we want to expose all the layers, all the times to stay together living in that moment. Next. This is the concert hall. Some earth to protect the previous steel structure that we found on the roof.
And here is the old oven
And this is the old
of the old
bread
bakery. No?
oven that was demolished, and we reused all the bricks in order to set the new toilets in another corner at the toilets with the reused.
The resources of the demolition. This is the bricks that the old oven, and we used to make the walls for close the bathroom. Next. And we use another new bricks like this for make the furniture for the coffee, and another bricks, another bricks for make different angles, and this brick move in this position, and it's good for the noise in the when they make the concerts.
We were not allowed to design flat surfaces. So everything has to have an angle because it's the only way that the noise comes back to you. You understand that? So if you have an angle, the noise goes back to another direction and it works. And all the bricks are coming from a factory which is at 1 kilometer of distance, and the bricks are cooked with biomass energy. So they're not using fossil fuel. So it changed completely the paradigm. It's not the same using a brick, which is your earth of the place, cooked with clean energies, than using a brick that is cooked with petrol, bring from somewhere like very far away. Do you understand the difference? And some jokes to Sigurd Leverens, because of course he's one of the reference of the place. And if you don't know him, please take note and look for him, Klippan in Sweden. It's the next trip you're going to do. Next.
Thanks.
Next.
Next. No one. Nobody won. Well, we are talking about wood. We are introduce some projects. One of them, please, next. Carles, thanks. Well, this building made Francisco more or less 20 years ago. And this building helped to us to introduce the wood, but it's about bricks and the joint between the bricks and the wood and the screws that we need to fix this wood. Next. Well, our reference at the beginning, again, is the living room of the John Hudson house, Canlis. You can see the holes that we have in this wall, these windows, without function. It's only for see the clouds and the sea. And in the right side, you can see the drawings of Louis Kahn that study these caves in the think of this wall. So for us, is something in between these two references. Please, next. But first of all, as said against John Hudson, and for explain his project with this drawing, first arrive to the place, decide what are the views, then put the table, and then we build the walls for protect this. In this way, this building is constructed like this. First of all, put these big boxes for the windows, and then he built the walls. Next. Well, this plan drawing help us for explain what is the situation of these two buildings, this project. This is protected by the cypress wall that we have on the top. Then the relation between the two volumes around this patio that contains the water tank and then the garden. We have all the different windows that we have, and we can see in this drawing have a function. This is one for sleep at midday. The other one is for going out if you have any problem in your atelier. The other one is for the cat and the dog, for see the garden. And the other little volume is for receive the clients and for show the pictures and these things, and is for listen music and work. Next. And well, in this section, we can understand the relation between the two volumes. One is 280 and the other one is 240. Okay. And we can see more or less how is the relation with the windows and the exterior and the use. The other one is our materials, our resources we have in this moment. This is, we don't have so many budget for make this project. So we use these thermo bricks of clay that we can find in any place, in any storage. These concrete bins and the piece in between. And the artist changed pictures for these amazing carpenters. You can see here the screws that we have to use for fix it. Next. This is an image that we make 2 years ago. 2 years ago, that how it's looking now, this building. And as we say in the office, of course, nature can exist without architecture, but the architecture never can exist without nature. Next, it's how it's looking, this relation between the bricks and this window. This is the window for exit if you have a problem inside. Next, this is the patio between the two constructions. Next. The interior, and here is introduced the two horizontal planes, the concrete and the construction of the roof. And Francisco play again with the joints between these pieces are between the beams. Next, you can see the relation of the views. All the windows, of course, the windows for going out and the windows we have in the patio is not working like this, but the others is always looking to the garden, because what happened near this house, the city growing up so quickly and it's not so nice. So our landscape is our garden. You can see in this one. Next. And well, the other project is one of the last we have in the office. It's a small project, but help us for explain some things, how we make a reform when we find this type of building. This is an old farmhouse. Next, that we have to change the roof of these 3 big rooms that are in the north. Now that we have this one that is falling down and we have to change. So next, that we make is make less as possible with this easy structure of wood and only with this metal union that help to us to keep out the principal beam that we normally have in the middle. Next. And for example, in this one that is so nice for us, we understand that how is working wood, that we have to separate the wood for the ground. So we make the basement with this piece of a stone, and the same with the contact with the wall. We put a piece. You see in the top, in the 2 sides. The light is not so good, but there are a piece of a stone inside the wall for the principal beam. Don't touch the wall because it's wet. Next. Here we have a detail that how it's working the basement of this pillar. Next. And this is an amazing room. We use the same solution that we saw at the beginning. And of course, this little project is so nice. This is a little shelter that we make in the east part of the island. And what we make is make this little construction only with the resources that we have near. Here we have trees, we have Poseidonia, and we have, is the word for the curtains? Spart for the curtains. Next. No, but higher. It's not a problem. So next. Well, we don't only have to make this construction, we have to study how it's moved the dunas, as Carlos explained. This is the plan. So this structure is like a big roof that inside have this little piece of furniture with a kitchen. And here we can see the section. This drawing is not so good because you can see the pillar that is inside the sun, as Carlos explained, that then going out. And for the horizontal force, we put 2 big stones. This is how it's looking now. When we put the shelter with the box inside and then close. Okay, and well, this is the first phase of Ari Munani School that we make with a shop look. Next. Well, first of all, we have to study the plot, the relation with the environment, where it's come from, the winds, the sand, and the wind sea. That is so important for us. And in the ORI drawing, we can see, of course, we knowing how to make a house or a building that working with a lot of insulation, of course, but what we have to make is to control the exterior for reduce the temperature. Next. And when we have winds from the north, we put laurels for protect the building. When we have the sun from the south, we make this like a croissant of trees. And when we have the sun from the west, we put these vertical caducifolial trees to protect the building too. And what we have is that we can reduce the temperature of the surface. Here you see the plot without the building and the project, and here you see the plot with all the elements. And well, this is how it's working. This is the first floor of the building, but it's helped to us. This is the first floor? No, this is the ground floor.
Ground floor, yeah, then
Yes.
down.
Yes, and help to us to explain all the project. This is working like a claustro with a patio just in the middle. And you can see here in the section how it's working the patio and the corridors all in the border. And here the constructive section that when you build with wood, you have to take care of this material about the water. As our face, if we cut, we can see all the elements that have to protect our eye. That is the more delicate organ that we have here. The same happen with this. This is how it's working the patio during the summer, next during the winter, and arrive the construction. As Carles said, repetition is help us to reduce the timing and the budgets of the building. And here arrived the CLT that helped to us to reinforce of the structure and the original movements. Next, and the result of this space is the classroom. Next. And then now some image about the construction. This is about structure. Then we put the insulation and the waterproof layer, and then the building ending. How it's looking from the exterior, the repetition and the detail. For example, here, this is directly a piece of concrete that is prefabricated only for protect the beams. Next. Detail about the section, detail about the pillar. And what we make always the same, protect the basement of the pillar about the water, concrete, zinc, and stone. Next. And this is about the detail of the screws. Here we use these screws. Next. In Puigdor Fila, the other project I explained, we use this type of screws again. And in the last one, we keep out the screws and only use wood for the unions.
I think it's so important now. We did talk about the joint. We talked before in the introduction that the tectonic is the relation of the joint between the profiles. Here you can see the different joints and the position of the beam. In this case, the beam is up the pillar. In this case, the beam is overside, and here is up, but the relation after the joint change. Next. And this is the question of this little building in a exhibition in Luton Central. We make this project. We had 4 meters for 4 meter for 4 meter and 4 meter for height, and we make a research about to use only wood and nothing else. And we made the different joints between CLT and CLT and beams and pillars and beams with CLT with the different joints with wood. This is important. Next. This is to reference. This is on left, Giuseppe Pennone. I don't know if you know it. It's an artist from Italian. It's interesting, no? Because he's obsessive with the wood. And they work directly with the trees, similar as. We try to take all materials in this research. On right is the technique. This is the
Made chips.
Yes, and it's important because there are knowledge how to make these joints with different profiles. Next. This is the position of the cabin. It's only there at the entrance. And we make, I think it's nice that when you enter to the exhibition, we put different trees for understand that the cabin is a little house. You make a research. How is the less elements to inhabit in a house? No, I think it's nice that finally is the light is a fire in the middle of the forest. Next, and every facade have a window, similar studio. You have first, and it's nice because every hole, every window is one position. First, the door is this position for entrance. After there are a bed, I don't know, with a furniture bed for dream, bench window, and table window. And you made different functions for the relation for our activities of every day. And after you have a relation from outside. Next. First, the material. In this case, we use a material from Austria because in Denmark there are trees to produce wood, and they work with a Kaliace, and this is the wood from Austria. This is far tree. No? Yes. Next. And we can see here the CLT, and they produce the different joints in the fabric, and after go to the exhibition to make the assembly. Next. And we burn outside because we try to make another research about what is the properties when you burn the wood. Because when you burn the wood, for example, 1, 2, 3 centimeters, you get more isolation, you make the protection of the wood, and nothing else. And this is the
insects.
No, it's not only for as water, it's more insulation.
Exactly, and water and the insects and you more make insulation. So on right, with hammer, you make the assembly of the whole building. Next. Here it's nice because you see here the different joints. This type or made joint between the horizontal surface and vertical surface. This joint for assembly, the joint between CLT, and in this case, this joint for make the windows is not necessary to put another widget because you are between CLT and can move. Next. This is the entrance, the first hall, and it's nice because these 3 little pillars is for put the first beam because the workers would put these 6 pillars to put this beam here and after close with the CLT in different facades. And it's nice because they made the distribution. You enter here you have the bench window, next, the bed window, and it's nice because here you put the different tools of the knowledge of the carpenters in Mallorca, next, and the table window. And this is the roof, the different relation of the beams. And it's so nice because finally, next. This exhibition, they went the director of the Irish school and the indoor in this cabin. And so nice because after the assembly, the cabin in the Wilson Center in Aalborg, they assembled in the University of Aarhus. Next. Okay. We worked during, I think, the last 5 years.
5, 6 years.
5, 6 years with wood. And you can see we start with the big buildings, different schools. After we make this little cabin without screws. And finally we think, okay, we can use the trees that we have in Mallorca when we explained before, because in Mallorca don't use this wood. And we make a company with a carpenter to make and process our wood. Next. We have a lot of trees because, for example, you can, in the end of the 19th century, there are 3 millions, and today there are 40 millions. And it's possible to use this material. We start this project because there are a big storm with 2 twisters in the mountains and destroyed 3,000 trees. This is important for us because sometimes you need something, some option to think what is the moment to start this project. No? Next, because finally you see these trees on left, the twisters cut these trees in the middle, and it's nice because finally you have a disaster, and to try to explain that this is the moment that it's possible to use this wood for make furnitures, for a start, because it's more easy to make furniture than buildings, because it's a research. Next, and this is so nice. Sorry, before. That the furniture, the carpenter, the structure, it doesn't go life on the tree. I think it's so nice because the tree, you know it, is, ¿cómo se costará? Contains CO2 in his wood. This is the process from the forest, put the wood, the tracks in the water tank because it's traditional techniques that the water entry in the canals inside the tree and take off the resina, the resin. Next. After we have massive wood and processed wood. Next. And we start with different wedges to make furnitures. And we use only the local wood, we use only wood for make the wedges. And finally, next, for make the joint between the board and the leg, only you need this on the left, 2 wedges and a hammer. Next. Finally, we make different designs of the furnitures. Next. And for example, this is put filler, and we continue with the second phase to put windows. We make a research that we go to the forest, take the trees, and after we research with the tables and carpenters. I think it's important because for many years. Okay, next. I think it's that the colors of the this is important. Each of the local materials and the workers in Mallorca, finally you get these colors. Next, we burn this window because it's outside, and we make another research what is the conditions and what is the properties that has this wood in the environment. Next. And finally, we work with 5 legs in this project. First, we use local wood and local workers. Second, it's important that we make a responsible management of the forest. Third, it's so important the product, the furniture, the carpenter, and we start now with structure. 4, the research that what is the properties and another techniques for work with the wood. And finally, it's so important that this is the community, because all persons that are working here, we make a relation, because it's possible today are 2 persons, but after behind this project, similarly in the project of Carlos, there are 10, 20 persons that drive possibility these projects. Next.
We believe that probably we have to talk to you about also this concept. So who's going to pass the pictures?
The control is broken, so we need more people for the lecture.
We don't have a remote. So that was a competition, a European competition. Maybe some of you know this competition for young folks. We still being young folks. And this is Palma de Mallorca in the 50s. The competition was called Grace because Grace Kelly was swimming in that water in the 50s, and this is now. Next. Back. Next. Back. Next.
You can see, in the first image that we have a balance in between the 2 ecosystems, that the ecosystem we have in the mountain and the ecosystem we have in the sea. But in this one, it's not only the border that create the hotels in the front sea, it's also the parking of the boats. So it's broken the relation between the 2 ecosystems that we have and the middle in the city.
So we really believe that it was not a question of public space. So it was a competition about designing the public places. Okay, so we thought that was like a misunderstanding of the real problem of the place. So next. So we start like studying what was happening there in this highway that we have on the first line of the sea. So you can see the sea just at the right side. So we have noise, next. We have heat, next. We have dirty waters going directly to the sea, next. We have the dirty waters from the rivers, next. So at the end, you realize that it was not about designing if the tiles of the ground have to be in pink color, gray color, white color. It was about the uses. So we realized that we had a problem, which is that this huge highway is because of the trucks. This is the place that the port is in the middle. So the port arrives 500 trucks every morning to deliver the food to all the hotels in the island. So it was so important to change the position of the port in order to remove all the asphalt of the highway. So that was the real change of the place.
I think it's important, Carlos, to talk about the team that we need for make this project.
Yeah, go.
Okay, for make this type of project, well, one of the things that is the best thing what we make is the team. We use an ecologo,
Well, an ecologist,
an ecologist, an engineer for movement, the circulation of the city, an engineer that who is a specialty in ports,
a naval engineer,
the engineer, and one girl that is working with kids. So how is looking the kids, the city. So we use all of this team during 3 months. Every week we have a meeting in the office and we learning how it's difficult to resolve all of this program. And one of the best things is the result of this project is the basement for create the new regulations in Palma. That this is a super goal.
Yeah, that's very good because we discovered here, we tested that designing the city is not about shape anymore. It's about discovering which are the real problems and how to deal with that with different approaches that we as architects, we don't have any idea about that, but we can have these very transversal teams. And we are very good in leading these kind of teams. So, and this is where come the action. It's about removing, not doing, but removing a lot. We want to recover the natural systems that they were underneath the asphalt. So everything in red is what we remove. And this is the urban mining. You know what is urban mining? It's about understanding the cities as the mines for the future. So everything that we remove is a resource that is going to be used somewhere else. Next. And this is how we achieve that. That was a place with a highway in the first line. So we removed the highway in order to have the complete beach, because a beach is not a piece of 10 meters of sand. You need 150 meters of sand, low plants, high-rise plants, trees. And then you need the water with the Posidonia meadow. So this is the whole ecosystem of the beach. And if you have it, it's a healthy ecosystem. If not, as human beings, you have to be like recovering the sand every year. And this is a huge problem because you don't have a self-sustainable system. You have something that it requires energy and resources. Next. 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 So finally, what we realize, and I think it's very nice, is that the city, it was the edge where the ecosystem of the mountains meet the ecosystem of the sea. And then we realize that it was only about recovering this ecosystem healthy way for the city. Right? So you can see the green coming from the mountains, the Posidonia meadows, and when the ecosystems are healthy, then people can be healthy. I think that's it. So,
Thanks.
Thank you very much for your presentation, and you will now have the opportunity to ask questions and discuss. And traditionally, we start over with a question from our first year students. So
Okay. Fine. Okay. I think my first question is about time because I find quite interesting how you work with material and how you understand material, even maybe material that you normally don't see, like structure material, you just show it. But I think it's a lot about craftsmanship, isn't it? And the individual, like you talked about the tools you need and the usage of the tools and the correct usage. So, and I think that needs time and knowledge. And how was your experience with that and the craftsmen's and craft women's who worked with the material and built your houses to understand your idea, maybe?
So the first step is that, at least in Mallorca, we have something more than beaches and beer. We're still having some offices and people which are like keeping this way of working. And that's very interesting because we can use it. So what we believe is that we can make visible the value of that. So that was dying, and then you make visible. So probably you also have it in some places in Germany. So probably the first step is to discover where they are and give them the value they have.
Yes, for example, for instance, the printer studio, which we built in 2002. I think first go to the storage of materials and look for what is the more material that you are interesting and more cheaper in this case. After different years, finally we go to use marble stone. After we use lime and clay, no? And now we are work with wood from other places and now to try to work. It's true, finally, it's important that the buildings are built with materials, with materiality. And it's important because what finally is true, I don't know who explain about this, no? Finally, the construction is the end of the building. Don't put different materials to close what is the material that they are behind this product, for instance, no? And behind there are a structure with bricks, with arc, you can see. It's interesting come to the origin and the more true possibility.
Another thing that maybe is important is to reduce the number of materials that we don't say maybe in this lecture. If you reduce the number of materials, you can understand how is working every material. If you use 100 materials in one building, it's impossible that you can control and you know how is working every material. It's more easy to reduce 3, 4, 5 materials.
And then you have to learn how to deal with the materials. So since there are like no tech companies in behind, you don't have a lab providing you like the regulations or the tools how to design that. So you have to learn it by yourself. So we are doing like the first effort to recover the techniques, and then everyone can use it. So that's the first step. And the second step is that when you have to do such an effort to recover these techniques, you cannot like learn a lot of different techniques. So for instance, now I'm trying to get like good enough in sandstone, and my next goal is to learn how to deal with earth. Like for instance, ram earth, like for doing
Wiggle.
ram earth.
We are where we go.
We're going to learn how to deal with earth, for instance. And I'm not feeling like having to learn anything else in the rest of my life because probably I don't have time enough. And I want to live until 100 at least.
Yes. And for example, another thing is so important, explain this, you go directly to look for the material. And there are other architects, I don't know, with, for example, Uts in the 70s. For us, it's open a door, similar La Lonja in the 15th century. Sagrera really only use one material, and with material resolve all things, no? For example, go to to the factories and to research to the buildings that you experience what is interesting, how to use this material to the more radical usage.
I don't know if your question is
Some more questions?
So I was wondering, as with the corona pandemic, a lot of like the global supply chains went down. If there maybe even is like a shift going on to going back to more local materials, using them more, and also using more like the global and not global, but the local craftsmanship more so now, because it just showed that if you depend on like a global system, there is also like a lot of things that can go wrong.
A representation on what is coming. So probably there was like a lot of people maybe not believing still in the climate change. So then you realize that we're fragile and it makes sense to provide a change. So now we tested that all the materials are increasing the price in a very crazy way. I don't know if you are aware of that, but for instance, steel has increased the price like 3 times, or wood that has increased twice, or concrete twice. So everything it's like crazy in the works. So a situation like that allows to think about some stuff that was impossible previously. For instance, can you imagine that in some years you put a regulation in order to establish the limits of what you are building related to the local materials? So imagine that for having a license, first you have to prove that you have some local materials or urban mining, and you are like demolishing something to provide the materials for the new building. Can you imagine that every city council has to receive that in order to give you the license, and that's about the limit of the building in a place? So that opens like a very new doors on debates that they were like impossible like 3 years ago, because if I would tell you that, you would like hit me in the head.
I think is how you adapt, to the situation. For us, for example, during the pandemic, start to make our new company that explained Francisco Amaral. So is how you adapt to the situations, and maybe it's a good thing is you make this click for this. Well, it's not a bad thing. So as Carlos explained, and we take the opportunity to make this company, and we have work on the table for make it, but it's our way. We are working like this, not for the pandemic, but several years ago, because we are believing this. In other case, we don't spend all of this time learning about how we make. Yes. Yes. Next one. Ah, ya le pilló.
Hello. Is it on? Okay. Okay. Thank you for the lecture. I mean, it was amazing how your project was tackling the global issues and then going closer to the local issue, and then you're using this technique not only from the Mallorca but also from this global
Sorry,
artist.
we can't hear you.
Yeah, I mean, your project was tackling the global issue, but also at the same time the local Mallorca issues as well. And then it was interesting to see how you're borrowing not only the Mallorca techniques, but also the techniques from all over the place, Italy and Johnson. And my question would be like, how would you advocate your work to make it to a bigger repose? How would you make your work to make it into a bigger movement? Would you set up a workshop with the communities or the architects to make your movement?
Yeah. Actually, I told you that my main job is not designing this stuff. This is like, in my case, it's my entertainment. So for them, it's their studio. But this is what I do on Sundays and holidays. Okay. So my real work is about coordinating the work for designing 1,200 dwellings in Mallorca, and they are designed in that way. So today it was not the subject, so I'm not explaining this project, that if you want Another day I can tell you about them. Today was about explaining this way of working. And actually, we have these 1,000 dwellings under construction. So we are working with 30 different architects, designing some projects. We have many companies building in that. So we discover that the regular companies can adapt to that. We discover that regular factories can adapt to that. And the first step is that we architects are the first ones that we can design in a different way. So we initiate a way of changing. And then when we are providing this solution, then people discovers that exist and then can develop the demand. So what we want is that like regular people provokes like a higher demand, like it is happening, I would say like in a kind of iPhone way. No? So everyone wanted an iPhone. No? So that's what we're expecting. No? Like everyone wants these kind of constructions because they feel better in the inside, they feel better in the outside.
But I think more or less the other part of the question you make is for make bigger buildings, or more meters with these resources. Carles explained, his work making all of this housing with this way, but there are another administration in Mallorca that can start to asking for this. So the key is renovate the industry. In our case, one resource that we have in the island, we introduce the material. So we transform from the resource to the material. This is what we make in Amarar. And this is the way that we have. We have to be better our industry, that understand our resources and how to work with this. And we can make, of course, bigger buildings with this.
So you can be a part of the change, talking with the factories. You know what we mean? So you have the knowledge, you can talk to them and help them to initiate the transformation and transition. Anyone else? Free microphone.
It's kind of connecting to this question. It's kind of with the client. Did you already had, or was there a client before which wasn't really aiming for this kind of architecture, who was kind of like more to the conventional, I would say, kind of art of architecture, like make everything out of concrete, whatever, and you kind of needed to kind of convince him with your kind of approach?
We can explain our how to work. Well, when you start at the beginning with this way, you have to talk a lot with the clients for explain what you want to make, what you think that is better for his housing. No, for example, the most easy is one guy that need a house, but during the years, the clients comes for this reason. So we don't have to talk about this. This is like when you open the light is come. So we use this type of materials. We don't have to talk about this.
I think the answer to your question is at the beginning it was like hell.
Yes, of course.
It was a real hell. I mean, come on, guys. No one asked for it. So you have to convince people. But now with time, things have changed so much. There are many changes coming. That now people is demanding that. And now every day it's easier and easier to do that. So what we need is to have the knowledge to give an answer to the questions they are asking to us as architects and collective.
As for example, if you need air conditioner, it's not only about the form of the house and morphology of the house. No, it's okay. Can I have comfort in this type of house without the facility of air conditioner? Yes, of course. So this is Carles explained. No, we control all our construction for have this knowledge for everybody and can say, okay, this solution is working, and this is work step by step.
Yeah, I think there was another problem, which was that sustainable architecture didn't have an image on the collective memory. So no one knew what it was about. So we had to work so much in order to give like a possible solution. So what we do is only one example, but now people knows that this example exists. So people that is interested in, they can go for it. And they know that this example is related to the heritage and the place. So I believe that if you are able to develop like your own way of working here, first, probably you have to provide this image, so it will be hard. And then when you have it, people will know it, and then you will be look for that. But if people doesn't know that exists, it's very difficult that they demand that. Does it make sense?
I think it's important to make the good questions, no? Because finally you make a lot of questions, it's possible that you lost. But if finally you make one question, how to use this stone, how to use this wood, you know a lot of things about this material. And it's true. At the start is so heavy because we don't know nothing. But now we learn so much the last 5 years working with the wood. And now we start to research about the material of Earth, to make a world with Earth. We don't know it. But now we try to make this research. I think it's important that you try to make a main question and go to resolve this question. And your knowledge is your knowledge.
Your knowledge, which is collective. Because actually the most beautiful thing is that you're not going to change that alone. I mean, it's much more interesting when all of you, or part of you at least, is working in one direction, and the achievements of your friends and colleagues helps to give this image to the collective memory, right? So it's achievement that you can do like together. And that's so nice because it's like not you alone. You're not Sylvester alone, you know? You're a proper bunch of people working for a purpose. And every step that someone do, like a friend, it's something that you can recover and bring it higher. And then when you get there, another friend is getting that achievement and is bringing even higher. And this is how we are like recovering and creating this knowledge again all together. And that's kind of beautiful, I think.
Everyone in the community.
Some more questions? Are you tired?
So tired.
Time for a beer?
Because I think listening to them is a quite important thing. I am really happy that you came here today because I really think that these lectures like today, that we just in a way also a class going deep into the relationships between material construction, local traditions, but also collective memory, as you said, is quite an important thing that we should do more in order to understand how to deal with this. Obviously, all of us, we are aware of the problem of climate change, of energy, of CO2, but there are many words and few samples to learn from. And this is what I really appreciate very, very much of the work of Aulets and Carles Oliver. I think that probably you too, I hopefully think so, because working and making it work from, let's say, from below, is a way of transforming the society. It's true that now we have in our mind how could it work in large scale where you cannot build this or that, but the question was answered very well by them. Yeah, you need to trigger the process, and in the moment you that are students have it already in your mind. Whenever you work in whatever scale, you will be able to find out solutions. Yeah? If not, we are going to be stuck and not advancing. So I find it extremely interesting, this lecture, and I thank you very, very much for